So welcome everybody, and inshallah we'll be spending the next 45 minutes sharing some ideas and some paradigms on leadership. And I want to begin by asking you to ponder on what leadership means. Okay, what is the definition of leadership? As you might have noticed it in your organizations, within your own life, within the circles that you move. What is leadership? Um, I'm in education leadership, and I have a lot of experience in education leadership. And one of the aims of education is to impart knowledge, to transform people. And what we find is that leadership is defined as making a difference. Okay, how much change you can bring about in the area that you are working in. Um, and there are many thousands, if not hundreds and thousands of studies on leadership.
Recording in progress.
But one thing that I want to focus on today is what are the assumptions that these models are based upon. And if we are coming from a faith-based perspective, what are the key criteria that we can use to evaluate a model? And that's why I'm going to focus on the spiritual dimension of leadership. Now, this is something that normally is discussed on the margins of leadership theory. But I'm going to argue today that actually this is a core fundamental part of leadership if it is defined within a faith-based perspective. And the starting point of this is moving beyond the material understanding of reality. So, what separates the faith-based perspective is that we believe that as well as a physical world, there is a metaphysical world, which we refer to as the ghaib. And we also believe, as well as a physical body, there is a non-physical body, the soul or metaphysical aspect that governs us. And there's a third fundamental difference in the faith-based point of view, which is we believe that knowledge can be gained through observation as well as through revelation as well. So the epistemological aspect is absolutely key. Now, from these ideas, we derive a worldview that talks about cause and effect as well. So, do we believe purely in physical cause and effect, or do we believe in a cause and effect that is beyond just the physical, visible cause and effect? So, these are some of the questions I'm going to be exploring today. Next slide, please. Okay, so the starting assumptions in terms of leadership. I mentioned that leadership is about bringing about change and a process that requires followers, strategy, and this mechanical idea of leadership is uh, is everywhere in every theory. So the idea is that a leader has a clarity of vision, has a strategy, implements that strategy, and that will lead to success. Okay, now that is a very machine-based procedural definition of leadership, which ignores many aspects of the faith-based vision of leadership that I alluded to earlier. Okay? And what a faith-based perspective looks at is that ultimately your existence is connected to something bigger and higher than yourself. Okay? And that's a fundamental difference. I'm in the field of education and the in the UK, and if you look at the educational legislation in the UK, since it started in 1944, the first Education Act, there is one duty that is placed upon schools and educators, and that duty is the duty to promote spirituality, spiritual development of children and the community. And that duty remains until today. And there's a reason why spirituality was in the curriculum, because otherwise we are just a robot. Okay? We are just a robot. So let's pause for a moment and ask yourselves the question, in the age of AI, where a robot, a humanoid, can replicate our body and our mind, our cognitive aspects. I was reading the other day that in some countries in the world, they've got companion robots. These are machines that look like humans. They're programmed to talk to you, remember your conversations, laugh at your jokes, and people are using them as companions. Now the question to ask is, if the robot can replicate our body and mind, what additionality do humans bring? What makes us different? Otherwise, we could just create humanoids, manufacture all these robots that look like humans. And the difference is that we humans have a soul which robots can never replicate. And that soul is connected to something bigger and higher. And our belief, and not just our belief, the spirituality in general, it connects with something bigger and higher than yourself. So that starting point is fundamental. Otherwise, you can just become a leader who is just a robot, yeah, without any spirituality. And I want to kind of just focus on this idea. What does spirituality mean when we are talking about leadership? And I've got some words there, but I want to use Surah Al-Fatiha as a frame to look at the qualities of spirituality that we should develop. And the leader has to develop these qualities first. Otherwise, you have a robot leading. Okay. And let me start with the first word I've got there, curiosity. Surah Al-Fatiha demands that we are curious about the world. We notice and observe things around us. And then that leads to awe and wonder. Wow, look, God's creation is amazing. The hamd part comes there. Okay. So this first idea of the spiritual leadership is that you are engaged with the world. You notice the signs of God. You notice the ayatullah. You notice these things. And you're curious, why is that happening? And signs of God are not purely in the natural world, but they are also in the human world as well. In events that happen in your personal life, events that happen throughout history, events that are unfolding in contemporary society. So God tells us in the Quran, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقُّ. So the leader, first of all, the fundamental quality of spiritual leadership is that you develop this idea of curiosity and engaging with the signs of God that are around you. And then the second quality from Al-Fatiha, continuing from Al-Fatiha, is this awe and wonder. And then that leads to hamd. Wow, amazing. Yeah. And what you'll find is that many people, when they enter leadership at a high level, their inner world dies. They feel nothing. They experience nothing. They don't find joy in anything. And that again makes them into a robot, because the robot cannot feel, cannot experience anything. It doesn't feel joy. It doesn't feel awe and wonder. It is actually dead, spiritually dead. So the second quality as a leader that we need to cultivate is awe and wonder. We are fascinated, we feel. And this is an aspect of khushu, of being in awe of God, based on knowledge and understanding and experience. And the third quality, again from Al-Fatiha, is the idea of gratitude, thanks. So hamd includes within itself the idea of praise and also the idea of gratitude, thanks. So this idea of being grateful, of showing gratitude as a leader, it's absolutely essential. So ultimately, you start off with gratitude towards your creator, but then also it leads to an idea that I value the people around me. Sometimes in leadership, this valuing and noticing other people, their contribution, that they are important, even giving thanks to them, can disappear from the vocabulary of the leader. So this idea of gratitude is ultimately very important. And the fourth quality, again continuing the opening of Al-Fatiha, is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, that we need to develop kindness and compassion and care. And the core quality that the Creator has described himself by again and again is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. And this is the essential quality of the universe that we need to inculcate as leaders. If you have a leader who does not show any care and compassion, they are not a spiritual leader. They are dead. They are a robot. So this idea of developing care and compassion and concern for yourself, for others, for the environment, for the world, for animals, this general philosophy of care and compassion, and that you are moved, your heart is softened to do something. Yeah? So that's the fourth quality of leadership: compassion and care. And then you'll notice that I've also put another word in the notes there, which is creativity and imagination. And the reason why I've put that there is that one of the fundamental roles of a human being on earth is we are the deputies, the Khalifa of God on earth. And Allah made us as his deputies. And what the deputy does, he stands in place of the main person, of the boss. And the main quality of God is creation. We make things. We are designed to make and create things. In the age of AI, we have become consumers of content. We don't produce anything. And if somebody spends all their life, all their day, in and out, day in, day out, just consuming content, digital content, they are not fulfilling the role of leadership on earth. So the idea of leadership is you're producing, you're making, you're creating, you're bringing something into the world. You're creating. And if you are not producing, then you are not fulfilling that responsibility. And then one more word I'll pick up from the notes there in the spirituality, the spiritual dimension, is justice. And this comes from Maliki Yawmiddin. So as a spiritual quality, a spiritual leader, is we affirm justice and fairness, and we speak out against oppression. We do not oppress, but nor are we oppressed. We do not stand by when injustice is unfolding in front of our eyes. So this quality or mindset of leadership is defined by these attributes that I have derived from Surah Al-Fatiha. Okay, so I'm going to pause there for a moment because I've said a lot of things there, probably information overload. But let me just recap that spirituality starts with the idea that you are connected with something bigger and higher than yourself. Okay, that immediately puts the checks and balances on you as a leader. Otherwise, without that check and balance, you as a leader can become a despot, a dictator, tyrannical, and because there is nobody to question you, you may commit injustice and create chaos in the world, all because there's no checks and balances upon you. So starting point, recognize that you are connected to something bigger and higher than yourself. Okay. Secondly, curiosity, always ability to engage, connect with the signs of God. Third quality was awe and wonder. You feel joy by looking at the world around you, so you genuinely feel and experience awe and wonder. third quality was gratitude. You give thanks to your creator and to those around you and to the environment and to all the conditions that make your existence possible. And the fourth quality was kindness and compassion. Kindness and compassion. And then the fifth was justice and fairness. So spiritual leadership has to be rooted in these qualities. Now, traditional leadership doesn't focus on the character or the values or the mindset of the leader. It purely focuses on the leader's ability to bring about change, enforce your plan, your will on other people, and produce outcomes, which is a very, very different mindset to spiritual leadership. Okay. Next slide, please. So I'm going to come back to something I started off with. That the spiritual leader recognizes that they exist in a reality that is more than just matter. It's more than just physical reality. Okay? So they live in the physical world, but also they affirm that actually there is an invisible world, and that invisible world intersects, interacts, and is connected deeply, intimately with the physical world. And that is the world where the ground where God exists, the angels, and the additional realities that we cannot see exist. Okay. And if you operate purely from a physical point of view, then your solutions as a leader will all be rooted in the physical world. Okay. And so let's unpick this idea a little bit more. So the starting point is that you are more than just a physical body. You also have a spiritual body. You have a soul. And that soul isn't from the physical world. Yeah, that soul isn't from the physical world. That soul is nourished, it's maintained, it's animated, given life to from a source that is not from the physical world. And I can prove that to you very easily. If you take a human body that is alive and imagine 10 minutes later it's died, the physical difference is very, very, very minimal. The body is still the same, the physical organs are still the same, but something has disappeared. And it's not a physical thing that's disappeared. And the second argument to prove that you are more than just a physical being is that if you look at the structure of the physical world, scientists have discovered that every single thing in the universe is made up of either one or more elements in the periodic table in chemistry, periodic table. But if you ask yourself the question, which element does consciousness come from? Your consciousness, which is non-physical. Yeah, where does that come from? You won't be able to find any element because your consciousness, the source of your consciousness is non-physical. Yeah? It's totally non-physical. So this starting point is that I am connected with something bigger. My reality, my essence is really non-physical. And if you look at a human being, what makes us human, what makes us different from a robot is all the non-physical. Yeah? Our memory is non-physical. Our imagination, non-physical. Our thoughts, non-physical. Our language, non-physical. Aspirations, goals, emotions, feelings. What makes us human is all the metaphysical qualities. Okay? So the starting idea is that you are operating both within the physical world and also the spiritual world. So you are a dual citizen. Both living in this physical world, but at the same time interacting with the non-physical world. And there are deep implications on this. So that's your body. But at the same time, there is the ghaib. The ghaib surrounds the physical. Okay? The ghaib is more real than the visible world. And the ghaib is populated with its own cause and effect, with its own entities such as angels, barakah, blessing of God. These are real entities, and those entities we can connect with through dua, through prayer, through charity, and they are means by which we can bring about change as well. And if you do not believe or acknowledge the non-physical world, the ghaib, as a leader, all your strategies will be rooted in only the physical world. And that is very poor. That is a very poor understanding of reality. Yeah, the very poor understanding of reality. It's a very shallow understanding of reality, and therefore your ability to achieve your goals, if you are only operating in one dimension, will be limited. Okay. So let's have a just quick look at the visible world and then the invisible world. So that we believe that nothing happens without the will of God. So therefore, that connection that I talked about earlier, that connection is absolutely fundamental, because we believe success and failure comes from one source, not purely from our own actions. And uh, and if you look at leaders that purely follow the visible world, they will attribute their success to their knowledge, their skills, their qualities, their networks, and so on. And there is a direct example in the Quran where God mentions the the one of the ministers of Pharaoh, Qarun, who was in charge of all the money. That's in that he said, قال إنما أوتيته على علم عندي, that I have been given everything because of my knowledge. Because he did not have an understanding, a concept of the real reality of how it is structured, and he attributed everything to his own success. And therefore the spiritual leader must avoid this at all costs. The spiritual leader recognizes that God demands that the spiritual leader, must take action, must be committed, must put in the hard work and the effort, but that is just the necessary condition. It is not that leads to success on its own. Okay, so this is a fundamental idea, that actually the source, the connection, that you are connected to something bigger and higher than yourself, is the core entity, core reality of you as a leader. Your trust in God then also gives you confidence as a leader, confidence to your team. Okay. And the belief in God's mercy, justice, it will also keep you aligned when difficult times come. And sometimes, if you have tried everything in your power and it doesn't work, and then the acceptance of the decree of God also helps the leader to understand, maybe I need to change direction, change course. Okay, next slide, please. So one other aspect of the spiritual mindset of a leader is this belief in cause and effect. Now, in the example I just alluded to about Qarun, where you only attribute success to visible, material causes. So if I have the right strategy, the right resources, the right amount of money, the right people, the right equipment, the right technology, I will succeed. Physical cause and effect. But we know, out of 100 people who've got that, only 10 succeed. There is more than just having the physical means and the resources and the people, human resources as well around you. So success isn't purely about the physical cause and effect. There is something else. And the story in the Quran that really brings this aspect for me is the story of Musa alayhi salam and Hidr. And if you read that story carefully, what you'll notice that story is drawing our attention to a non-physical cause and effect, things that we can't see, but there is a non-physical world that's happening, that's operating the ghaib. Yeah. Khidr is operating in the ghaib, and that non-physical cause and effect, which Musa, peace be upon him, he was a man of the law, and he only saw the physical external impact, and God was teaching him that actually there is a non-physical world as well, and the cause and effect, what you might think this is bad, the destruction of the ship, the damaging the ship, but actually there is a higher cause and effect which will lead to better outcomes. So this idea of cause and effect, that there is a physical cause and effect, and there's also a spiritual cause and effect, and the spiritual cause and effect is connected to your intention, is connected to your trust and confidence in God, is connected to your ability to attract barakah as a leader in your organization, and that's through your actions, to the conditions that you create. And that cause and effect also is a powerful dimension of leadership, which the material models of leadership completely ignore. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I don't want to go too much detail in terms of the philosophy of cause and effect, but just to point out a few things. So if you imagine, if I was writing on the board with a pen, and somebody comes in and says, "Oh, the pen is writing." The pen is writing, and actually, they are telling the truth, because if I look at what's happening, the pen is moving across the surface of the board, and the pen is making contact, and the tip of the pen is shaping the words, and it's writing. Even though that's true, we know that actually that is just the proximal cause. That's just the first cause that we see. But the ultimate cause is the human being, the person, the teacher that is holding the marker, even though the marker is there. And many times we confuse, and especially science confuses the proximal cause with the ultimate cause. And it's really important that we recognize that our scientific way of looking at matter, it works for material objects, but when it comes to metaphysical objects, to leadership, to human life, it doesn't work. And even, on the level of quantum physics now, our model of the world based on Newtonian physics doesn't work anymore. So cause and effect, for our purposes, for the purpose of the spiritual leadership, is recognizing that actually it's not my actions that are leading to change, but actually God is the ultimate cause, and there are other spiritual causes, and I can contribute to those causes, for example through dua. I can contribute to those causes, for example through spreading kindness and compassion, living the values I talked about earlier on, and that then draws the blessing and the barakah of God into your life, first of all, and secondly into the life of your organization, your team. And this aspect is really crucial, and the closest we get to it in leadership models is about culture. We talk about the culture of an organization, and that culture contains the values and beliefs of an organization, and those values and beliefs always stem from the values and beliefs of the leadership team. And so therefore this idea of spiritual cause and effect that can be effected through dua, through charity, through turning back to God, through tasbih. And again, tasbih is not just a word we utter, we are connecting into the spiritual ecosystem and of cause and effect, and then that will impact upon us. So understanding the spiritual cause and effect, that we are operating in an ecosystem, infrastructure, where there are spiritual causes and effect. Okay, I'm just going to pause there. I've said a lot of things. I'm just going to give you a minute. Just if you were now with me, I'd ask you to talk to somebody next to you. But since you're all separated, I just want you to, in your own mind, just reflect upon some of my argument, some of the the paradigm that I'm presenting? Does it resonate? Can you find any connection? Are there any challenges? And how do you respond, think in terms of your understanding of leadership, and how does what I'm saying now in terms of shifting the frame, shifting the paradigm to include the spiritual dimension as the core part of leadership? I could just pause for one moment, and if anybody has got any comments or questions so far, we'll take them now before we carry on.
Please feel free to unmute as well if you want to ask a question or to make a comment. You can also add things to the chat.
This is just reflection time. I think, and remember I was talking about producing, and by its very nature, this way of webinars is very, very passive. So you can make it active by using imagination, try to recreate the points I've made, put them into an image in your mind, connect it with things with your own life experience, examples that you've experienced. What is your experience of the ghaib? We operate in the ghaib. What is your experience of the non-physical world?
So Hadir was asking, yes, would you explain, and please explain again the second quality,
Okay.
khushu of a spiritual leader? I didn't understand it very well.
So Khushu's got many aspects, but the aspect I want to focus on is where the heart rejoices. You feel humbled by the knowledge you've seen. So an example I gave is, imagine, you just think about this idea of the phrase Allahu Akbar. Think about the phrase Allahu Akbar. Now let's just focus on the literal meaning of that phrase. God is bigger, not greater. The word Kabir in Arabic means bigger. Let's just focus on the physical aspect of and like Google zoom up, and then you're on Earth, and then zoom out again, or you're in the solar system, zoom out again into the galaxy, and if you keep zooming out again, the universe is so vast. And if you imagine you convert into a ball, you on Earth, you would need a microscope that could magnify 1,000,000 times just to even find you in that ball, in that hole, in that ball of the universe. You're so tiny, so insignificant, you wouldn't be able to see you from anywhere. And yet you are talking to a being that created this. That created this. And just as an image. Now, one of the mechanisms that the Quran uses for us to understand concepts is imagination, metaphors, and examples. Okay? So if you imagine that the whole universe is a ball, can you find yourself in there, on planet Earth, in your country, in your city? You are not even a speck within a speck within a speck within a speck within. So tiny. We are so insignificant, and yet our tiny voice can be heard by the creator of the universe. Through all of that, our tiny, tiny voice lands in the presence of God. And so if you focus on those aspects where you feel awe and wonder, wow. I mean, even if you look at the earth, the spinning of the earth, the night and day, if the earth didn't spin, one side would be totally frozen and the other would be totally hot. Like our twin planet Venus, it takes over 100 days for one turn, for one day. Our 100 of Earth days. And so one side is so hot, one side is frozen. So when you look at the miraculous nature of these things that are happening, that produces a sense of, wow, this is amazing. And that's what we call awe and wonder. And you feel, wow, this is amazing. And that feeling is khushu, where your heart is alive. So khushu is you feel humbled and awe through your knowledge and thinking and imagining of the universe and all the miraculous things that are happening inside it. Then you feel that 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 joy inside you. Wow, this is amazing. And if the word wow comes from your mouth, that is one aspect of khushu. Okay? And that is something you can't do without pondering, without reflecting, without noticing things around you. Okay, I hope that kind of helps a little bit. So we've only got about okay, Jazakallah, thank you, the Khalid, for that comment. So we are short of time. I'll just carry on with the presentation, and then we'll pause for some questions and answers in a moment. So I kind of want to move on to now an aspect of leadership that which is, how do we measure success? How do we know that we are successful? What are the things that we are measuring? And in the material models of leadership, that success is measured in profit, in money, in followers, in market share. It's in all the things that you can physically measure and that are linked with growth, but they do not look at anything beyond the physical. Okay. Now I want to introduce another concept here in terms of how do we measure success. And that concept is what I call the spiritual bank account. Yeah, it's a spiritual bank account. And I always share this idea with children and with my friends and colleagues that when you are born, God opens up a spiritual bank account for you. And this idea is derived from an ayah in Surah Al-Kahf, where Allah says, وَالْبَاقِيَاتُ الصَّالِحَاتُ خَيْرٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّكَ ثَوَابًا وَخَيْرٌ أَمَلًا. That there are certain actions that remain and last forever. Okay, they last forever, and those actions Allah will gather, will contain for you, and He will reward you for them. So people who work, they do a job, and the employer will put money into their bank account. Okay, that effort will be rewarded, and in the same way, God rewards you for all the good things that you do into your spiritual bank account. And that is your success. The person who fills their spiritual bank account through acts of kindness and compassion and acts of remembrance and worship, this will build their spiritual bank account up. So it doesn't matter whether one person turns up or a million people turn up. You will be rewarded. God has already put the investment, the payment has been made to you. Now, to give a concrete example, let's take the Prophet Nuh alayhi salam. Now this is, the example is not in the notes, but I just wanted to share this with you. The Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, was he successful based on the metrics of the material model? So let's start first of all. Number of people that followed him. Would we say he was a success? After 950 years of preaching, a handful of followers. And the material model will say, no, you've not met your KPIs there. You've not met. This is terrible success rate. But yet we know that the Quran regards Nuh alayhi salam as one of the most amazing prophets. Yeah, as a success. But because we measure success purely in physical terms, it's hard for us to accept that. So it's really important to recognize that actually our metrics of success must also include the spiritual scorecard, your spiritual bank account. And that is real because once you have finished your time on earth, the only currency that will work will be the investment, the money that you've got in that bank account. And we know that the Quran tells us that Allah will weigh your actions, and so therefore we know that the payments will be there in physical, real terms. So this idea of am I building, for example, the spirituality of my team? That's a very powerful metric. Am I building kindness and compassion? Am I building those values that I talked about from Surah Al-Fatiha? Am I building curiosity, that they're engaging with the signs of God? Am I building awe and wonder that these people are alive? They can see the beauty of of God's creation. They can see the beauty and miraculousness of life on earth. Am I producing kind and compassionate employees? Are we standing up for justice and fairness, even though it might come at a cost? Yeah, are we doing that? Okay. So this idea of the metrics of success is very important, because in the material model, we only measure metrics based upon physical criteria. And that is important, but again, I would say it's necessary, but the spiritual leader also will scan for all these other things. Yeah, they will also collect evidence and data of, am I developing the spiritual dimension of people? Am I bringing goodness into the world? And the Prophet ﷺ said, Khairun nas man yanfa'un nas. Yeah, the best of you are those who benefit others. And I like to translate that in two words: add value. Yeah, are you adding value to yourself, to your family, to your friends, to your city, to your country? Are you adding value? Are you adding value into every interaction, every person you meet? Even within 1 minute, you can add value to the life of that person. And that is a spiritual scorecard, and that will go into your spiritual bank account. And so this idea of keeping an eye on the spiritual metrics is so important, and that we could put it under the culture and values piece, but actually it is like the bottom of the iceberg. It's on this that your success as a leader rests upon, builds upon. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so we've kind of touched upon this, that your connection with something bigger than higher than yourself will define you. Now, usually success in the material model is measured by ego, how much it makes the leader feel good, and they are doing it for their own personal glory, to gain recognition, to gain fame, to gain influence and power. And so the spiritual leader, the intention isn't to do that. The spiritual leader's idea is that we are promoting, fulfilling our duty of being the Khalifa of God on earth. And I want to introduce another concept here, which is a concept that you will all be familiar with, but I want to give you another dimension to this. And the concept is of ibadah, worship. Okay. Now, we're all familiar with the idea. Now, the word worship is it doesn't capture the full essence of the word abada in Arabic. And I want to just focus on one dimension of this idea of abada, and I will connect it with the qualities of leadership. And Allah tells us in the Quran, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسَ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ. That we were made for worship. But here's the thing. Worship in our minds is something purely that happens in a place of worship. And because we don't have an example in ordinary life of worship. Worship is only seen in temples and places of worship. But if you go back to the root word, abada, and Ibn Taymiyyah in his small book Al-Ubudiyya talks about this, and he says, the word abada and ibadah comes from the phrase at-tariq al-mu'abbad, the well-trodden path. The well-trodden path. Now, many people are focused on this idea of the dhallul, where the path is lowly and the person is higher. So therefore, one aspect of worship is that you are making yourself low and humbling yourself in front of God. But there's another dimension that I want to highlight, which is that it's the well-trodden path. And what happens is that the path takes on the prints of the people that walk on it. It takes on the imprint. If you walked on it with your trainers, it would leave a mark of the patterns of the sole of your trainers on there. It takes on the imprint. And so our idea here, this concept, is that we take on the imprint, the qualities that God has chosen for us and that God has described for himself, such as kindness, compassion, justice. So the job, the motivation of the leader is that you are trying to bring yourself in alignment with the values and qualities that God has chosen for us. Okay, and those qualities I've mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha. So if you are aligned with them, you are in a permanent state of ibadah. If your organization is aligned with them, you are in a permanent state of ibadah. So this idea of what your purpose is that you are aligning yourself with the values and the qualities of God. And this links in with another idea. What is the core identity of the leader? Yeah, what is the core identity of the leader? Yeah. I'm just going to pick on this. I have got a slide on this later on, but I just want to kind of mention it with the concept of ibadah. You just go, keep going. Next slide. Next slide. Again, another one more. I kind of briefly mentioned this already. One more. Abdullah. There we go. This one. Okay. So, your core identity. How do you define yourself? Most people have multiple identities, and we define ourselves by external metrics. So, for example, it might be our gender, our ethnicity, and then we define ourselves by our family, our tribal affiliations, or we may define ourselves by our job that we do. And so all of these ideas of identity are there. But what is our core identity? And the core identity of the leader is Abdullah. And I always share this idea that the opening words of Isa alayhi salam, Jesus, peace be upon him, when Maryam pointed towards him and he said, Qala inni Abdullah. There are so many other things he could have said, but the core identity is that we are Abdullah. We are connected. Our life, comes from that source. He's a qayyum that is maintaining us, our existence. And so everything we do, we are taking on his qualities. We are the mirrors that reflect his qualities. We are taking on the imprint of God. So the leader has to model this idea of being Abdullah for his team, for his organization. Otherwise, the leader can become a tyrant. He becomes totally despotic. Okay. So this idea of the core identity, your identity is Abdullah. And that identity, nobody can take from you. Yeah. All other identities can be politically manipulated. But your core identity, which gives you confidence, is that you belong to your Creator. Yeah? You are taking on his qualities. You are his deputy on earth. You are Abdullah. And that identity frees you from all other inferiority complexes, all other comparisons. And in the material worldview, we always define people by external metrics. Yeah? And this allows you to subvert that, break out of that external metric. You can't define me just by my ethnicity or by my nationality. My identity, you cannot harm that, because my value and worth doesn't depend on how you define me, but it depends upon how well I reflect the qualities and attributes of God. Okay, so my being Abdullah is your core identity. That is your core identity, and if you're rooted in that identity, then that will then attract the barakah and the blessings of God into your life as well. So I want to kind of wrap up now, go back to where I started at the beginning, which is that we can look at the world in material terms, and the material world, basically, we don't believe in that there is no non-physical, metaphysical existence to the world. It's just the physical world. And that is a very reductionist view. So we affirm that there is a non-physical dimension to ourselves. We have a spiritual body, a soul. There is a spiritual world, the ghaib, which we are operating in. There is spiritual cause and effect. And our qualities that we are developing, the curiosity, awe and wonder, kindness and compassion, gratitude and justice. These are the qualities taken from Al-Fatiha. This should be at the heart of your leadership mindset. Okay? And this way of framing brings in the faith-based perspective that we are more than just a physical body. There is more to life than just the physical world.